All right. I think we're about ready to get going. Let's just give everyone about another minute. Okay. So welcome everybody to the Reston Comprehensive Plan Task Force meeting. Let's go ahead and get started. We do have a pretty full agenda tonight, and I want to thank everyone for their patience for starting a little bit later. We're doing the 7:30 to 9:30 run again tonight. And I know several of you, and I was on the call for the Reston Service District Advisory Board, basically the Transportation Service District. So thank you for task force members that are providing service there as well. So Jose, if I could ask you to put the agenda up on the screen, let's just go over the agenda quickly. Then we'll dive right in. We do have several things tonight. Looks like we have good participation, good turnout by panelists, as well as several attendees that are watching. And I think everyone is pretty used to the process right now, so I won't go over that. But if you have any questions, feel free to contact either Lisa Connors or Jose Del Cedu of my staff with any technical questions. So here's what we've got tonight. See if there are any changes anyone wants to provide. Under updates, we have updates on several subgroup or topic areas: transportation, equity, public health, population. Then we're going to go over changes to the language in the comprehensive plan on parks and open space. That's been, it's come to the task force a couple of times. Now we're very much in the process of looking at specific language recommendations. Then on affordable housing, we'll be talking about an approach. We did have a presentation at the last meeting from county staff on affordable housing. So we're going to try to have some discussion about what folks think would make sense in terms of an approach towards affordable housing under an updated comprehensive plan. Then we'll have a presentation on energy and environment from Joe Gorney from Department of Planning and Development. And that'll be followed by a discussion. And then Jose, if you could scroll down just a little bit. We're going to end up with a discussion on, this is kind of a cryptic title, I apologize for that, but it's economic diversity, long-term viability of large blocks. So that's gonna have, I think, a relatively short discussion, but I think an interesting one, looking at some of the issues of how we're getting development and then how that development perhaps works over a long period of time. So anyway, that'll be fun. Save the fun part for the last, I guess. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead then and go back to the first item. Any changes?
Excuse me. Excuse me. John Carter is trapped in attendees.
We'll bring him up, Tammy.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
All right, John. John's about to get promoted. All right, thank you, Tammy. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda as shown tonight? Okay, and as John is moved up, there's John. All right, we have John Carter now. So let's go ahead and go through the updates. First of all, on transportation, somebody I just saw a few minutes ago at another meeting, John Mooney. John, do you have any updates from the transportation subgroup?
Thank you, Walter. I do, and I'll be very brief. The Transportation Committee or Transportation Connectivity Working Group plans to have a draft to you suitable for the full task force discussion by April the 7th for discussion at this task force meeting on April the 12th. And our goal is to have this task force do approval of the final version on April 26th. To do that, I believe that we're probably going to have either an extended meeting with transportation pretty much the focus on April the 12th, or we may have to have another task force meeting. So I want to alert people. We can speed that meeting on the 12th up if people read the version, the penultimate version to come out of our transportation subcommittee. Read the version that comes out of our meeting on the 30th. Okay, so the better you know the version that comes out of the 30th, the more ready you will be to deal with the final version, final draft version, coming out on April the 7th, and you'll be better able to discuss it on April the 12th. Make sense?
It does to me. So everyone's going to have a little homework there, but thank you, John. Anything else on the transportation work and connectivity working group? All right, John, thank you, and thank the group there for all the work that's been going on. Very good discussions, and I do look forward to the recommendations coming from that subgroup. Let's move on to equity and public health, that topic. Jose, do you want to give us an update on that?
Yeah, we have the first meeting this Thursday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. So Carla, Bruce, and her team will be talking to the small group on providing some information on equity and suggested language for the comp plan.
All righty. Any questions for Jose on equity and public health?
I think Tammy has a hand. I see a physical hand.
Thank you. Oh, good. Tammy.
Is that a closed committee, or, I mean, in other words, I don't mean closed, obviously nothing's closed, but has that committee already been formed with members?
Yes. We have, I believe, 6 members. We have Michelle Kimmel, Richard Caballos, Alvarez, Reston Bell, Lynn Molston, and Chris Daniel.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Tammy.
Any other questions on equity and public health? Okay, then let's get an update on population. John Carter, do you have any updates on that?
So what, did you want to just talk population, or is this land use?
Yeah, why don't you cover both?
Okay. So we have pretty good numbers from all of the areas, except we still need numbers for the TSAs organized by the 3 TSAs. But anyway, the proposal that I would suggest, and we talked about this last time, so I probably don't need to emphasize it too much. There's a 7-step process. What's the maximum allowed in the comp plan? That's the number. What's been approved and what remains. And then there'll be land use decision-making principles. My proposal is to go through the large areas in Reston, starting with convenience centers, village centers, other commercial areas in the PRC, such as the Home Depot area, the residential areas, including areas like Charter Oaks and those other areas that have been controversial, and then the 3 transit station areas, and discuss those one at a time using the principles to craft new language. And what I would do is take the comp plan as it's worded today, and just, I think it's already organized pretty much by these areas, add the numbers to it, and then we would go through each one at a time, starting with the 2 easiest ones, which would be probably convenience centers and village centers. And I would propose just to go through this with the whole task force, and everybody lists their aspirations. Hopefully we'll have an organized way of doing this. And at the end of our session, we would be done with that aspect, and all that would be left, it would be to write it up or change the comp plan as it's today written. So that's the proposal. To get the maximum density, which would be determined at the same time, you have to earn your way to the density, which is following the appropriate set of principles for each plan as we go. So that's my suggestion. And we could take this whatever date you like, next time, the time after that. But I think we should get on with this, actually. And I think we can move pretty quickly because people know their areas. If it's too quick, we can stop, but I think we can move right along since the comp plan is pretty clear when it comes to land use. You may or may not like it, but at least you have something to start with.
All right, thank you very much, John. And we can certainly coordinate with you and DPD staff on getting those scheduled. I think we are going to have a pretty busy April.
Yeah.
So any questions or comments for John on population and related land use? Okay, Jose, I think we have also, I know you and I
have a
were.
question. Hi.
Yes, Jan. Hi, Jan.
Yeah. So, is there any way that we can lower the number that was written in that plan? It's an awful lot of people in a fairly small area.
Well,
Even
that's
if we build up
I think not to be concerned about it yet. What we'll do is
Okay.
just take each area as it goes, and however it ends up, it ends up. But everybody needs to be in their A game to be looking at each of the areas. I suspect it's going to come down a bit, but why prejudge it? Why don't we just go through each one and see where it ends up? I'm not trying to be coy about this. I think if we just do it in an organized fashion, we'll get someplace where people will be satisfied. If not, they'll say so.
Okay, thank you, John.
Supervisor, I think Tammy
Trust
has
the
a physical
process a little bit at the beginning and see where we can go.
we have a couple hands. I saw Mark Malcolm with his virtual hand and Tammy with her physical hand.
All right, Mark, then Tammy.
Thank you very much. The question's more toward John Carter. What's the timeline that we expect to get any population estimates from looking at each of the individual TSAs? I didn't hear it.
Well, we
Do you
have
have
some
any-
preliminary numbers, but they need to, we'll get that before we work on it. So I'm not sure whether there's anything else to say about that. We have a lot of the numbers. We have what's been approved since 2015. Where we struggle a little bit is what's before that. But we won't work on it unless we have the numbers to start with. The
No,
other areas, we
I
have the
understand.
numbers.
Because I have the greatest concern with the Herndon station area, and it had several major developments
Yes.
that are not likely to. A couple of them are not likely, but others are further into the future. They address what Jan's concerns are.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
All right, and I believe Tammy.
Yes, and John, just to clarify, from whom do you need statistics or numbers?
Well, I'm hoping the staff will produce those numbers.
Okay, and do they have a very specific list of what we need so we can
Well,
work on this?
If they don't, I'll resend this out so that we're just now finalizing the method of organization and maybe Walter and Jose may want to think about a little bit on how much we can cover on a given the other items that we have. So whether we're going to do one item or two items, my initial idea is just do the convenience centers and the village centers, which are probably the easiest to do. So we all get used to working with each other. And what I would do to organize this is start out, I'll give you the numbers, I'll give you the excerpts from the plan that talk about each one of the areas, and I'll give you the numbers. And we would start out with expecting a one sentence vision. The village centers will be what? And then we would just go to the characteristics of these village centers, just one to however far as we get. We don't need to argue about it. We just list them all and see where we end up by the end. And I think that method will get us somewhere fairly quickly. And I'm counting on people knowing their areas pretty well, which I'm sure we do. And we'll get the stuff out ahead of time. So if people need a little bit more information, they can go get it, or I can provide it, or the staff can provide it.
Thank
This
you.
is something I've done many, many, many times. I haven't done it on Zoom, so I don't know how that's going to work. But let's give it a try and see where we're going.
And John, you haven't done it in Reston, I don't think. So.
Well, yes, we did do it in Reston.
Oh, that's right. 6 years ago. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, good call. All right, and I see Charles has his hand up, and I believe that's it. Then we'll move on. Charles.
Sorry about that. Just a
Nope.
quick question for John.
Yes.
How and when will we be able to comment on specific areas? Do you have a group like the Transportation Committee, or are you going to send this around to the whole task force and we can review it and comment?
The idea is to send it around to the full task force, see if we can do it that way. And we'll have our initial discussion of the aspirations that everybody has at the first session. Hopefully that's the end of it. If we have to have additional discussions, that would be fine. But certainly it would be good to start, people should start organizing their thoughts, because this is going to move fairly rapidly. So not a bad idea to think about this. That's why I'm giving a heads up of doing convenience centers and village centers first. But
And
yeah,
the
go out
session
there and
is,
take a look at them and
the session is the meetings we're having now, the
yes,
bi-weekly
yes.
meetings. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Charles, and Tammy and Mark, and thank you, John. Looking forward to getting into that as well. There is a related issue. Jose, do you want to address? You and I were in a meeting recently with some folks. If you want to note that.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, we met with Fairfax County Public Schools and their team, and they will be coming to the task force at our second April meeting, April 26th. We had discussed with them the population numbers that were presented to the task force, I believe, last month. And Jeff Plattenberg and his team will come to the task force to talk about some of the concerns with schools and all that stuff. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jose. So we'll have FCPS,
Yep.
Who will come along and basically give the task force an opportunity to ask them about what's currently in the comprehensive plan relating to schools, and if there should be any changes in what the schools should be either asking for or planning for in the comprehensive plan for Reston. So look forward to that as well. Any questions or comments on that?
What's that date?
Do we have a date, Jose?
Yeah, it should be the 26th. So yeah, so we have a meeting on the 12th, and then the second meeting in April, which is April 26th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so if there are no other questions on those, let's move into parks and open space. And Jose, I think this one is yours, and I want to thank Larry Butler, who is at least his name's on the screen, or was, for all the work that Larry did pulling down. Thank you, Larry. I see you now, for pulling all this together. And actually, I believe there was one set of comments that was that are suggested changes beyond Larry's changes. Jose, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, struggling to unmute. Yeah, I'm happy to take it from here. So we had brought Parks and Rec to the task force, I believe, back in January, and then Larry met with RCC and also the Park Authority to discuss some of these changes. So I sent out to the task force, not last Friday, but the Friday before, a version 4, clean version and a version 3 with all the comments that I had shared with Larry. So I'm gonna run through version 4, and we received comments from one of our regular attendees for task force meetings as well. You'll see those in purple. Those come from Mr. Farrell. So and Larry, you're more than welcome to jump in if there needed to be any clarification as well. So
Will do.
or not, if it's okay. So yeah, we have we discussed removing removing the town of Herndon, including RCC, including Southgate Community Center, Reston Teen Center. We and then there was just a repositioning of the park authority, and then for everyone kind of knows Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority as Nova Park, so I thought that was a friendly amendment to this section. And Mr. Farrell included expanding on what Reston Association currently has as far as parks and rec space. So that is the 1,350 acres of open space, including 800 acres of woodland, 50 meadows, 20 miles of stream valleys, 4 lakes, 4 wetlands, 3 ponds, 55 miles of trails, 15 ball fields, 15 swimming pools, and 52 tennis courts. Yeah, we can stop there, or we can go through the whole paragraph and circle back if it's easier for folks.
Jose, if I can just make one comment.
Yes, go ahead.
In one of the early versions, the town of Herndon was struck out, and I actually reincorporated that in part because I'll just real frank here. Our tennis players, when we end our season, they go to Herndon.
Okay.
So we work closely with them. And so I think it's an acknowledgement that the town of Herndon is providing services, particularly, and as Mark Malcolm said, right around Herndon TSA too. So I don't think there's any foul with leaving that in there, but that's just my opinion. And the rest of the task force, I'm sure will want to weigh in.
Yep. Yeah. Do we want to take some comments on bringing it back into the text of the plan? Anyone can unmute and mute. It's totally fine.
Yeah, Jose, I'm sorry, this is Lynn Molston, but this version that I'm looking at is different than the version 4 that I had as an attachment. So is this new?
Yeah, like Lynn,
Okay, thank you.
like I explained, version 4,
Sorry.
what I sent out 2
Yep.
Fridays ago,
Right.
is different than this one. This is the one that has some of those version 4s, but also has some of the comments from version 4, but also has additional comments from Mr. Farrell as well. Who
Okay,
regularly
thank you
joins
for
our
the
meetings.
clarification.
Of course, Lynn. Any other comments or questions?
Jose, this is David Vanel. I see no reason why we shouldn't include Herndon.
Okay.
Yeah, Larry, thank you for solving that mystery. That came up earlier and none of us could remember or knew why town of Herndon was in there.
Tammy?
I have a little bit of a concern, and that is people from Reston may go to Herndon, but Herndon people also come to Reston. At what point do you cut it off? This is the Reston comp plan, not the Reston, Herndon, Great Falls, Vienna, Oakton comp plan. And that's why I think it should remain Herndon. I mean, not Reston, not have Herndon in there. I'm concerned that, I'm a little confused. This is the comp plan, and we are delineating every single amenity that we have from private sources, which are RA, and to an extent RCC, which is paid for with a small demographic of a surcharge tax. And then we have Fairfax County Park Authority, which is paid for with a county-wide tax. We pay, Restonians pay for, amenities all over the county, and they contribute onto ours, but the other two are only self-funded. And for sure, Reston Association is private property. So I want to understand, and the reason I'm concerned is we have an abundance and we welcome this. And I want to make that clear. We are an inclusive community. We are formed to be inclusive. That is the difference between Reston and other places. But we have a bigger population of less wealthy people for whom we strive to provide amenities, recreational and cultural amenities and parks. Yet we are self-funding, I would say the majority of it, with not that much participation, or at least not as much participation from the park authority, which is publicly funded, than I think we should have, given the fact that we have a lot of people to provide services for who are unable to, pay fees to attend. And I really, that is my concern. And that's a little bit why I am territorial about Reston, is I want to make it very clear our mission is to be inclusive, but at the same time, we have been, in my opinion, I've lived here 45 years, we've been shorted on county give me's for recreation. So that's why I hold that view. Thank you.
No, thanks, Tammy.
And I believe Gary, who is actually not an RA member, nor PCA member, Gary has his hand up. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I guess, and I'm following along with what Tammy said there. I kind of agree with that. In the comp plan, I just don't know why I would put all this detail in of what Reston Association has. I think that kind of clouds the issues that we're trying to get to here in terms of where we're going with parks, recreation, and open space, that we need some of this taken care of and funded by developers or the county, whatever. And this kind of clouds the issues, which I think Tammy was pointing out. So I'll add that and just say I've got a comment or two here, and a bunch of others as we go through. So I'm ready to talk about after that, my comment there, the first part of the next paragraph.
Okay, we've got several hands up, and let's get some comments in, and we might end up, let's see how things go, but we might end up needing to send this version around for more written comments, but let's keep going for now. I see Burton, and then David, and then John Mooney.
Hi, I just put my comment in the chat for easy reference on the first sentence under parks, recreation, and cultural facilities. The way there's the sentence is put together is awkward. Currently provide park, recreation, and cultural facilities and amenities that promote community health and wellness to everyone in Reston. I don't like everyone in Reston, and it's kind of confusing. It sounds like these are facilities and amenities that are promoting health and wellness to everyone in Reston. Promoting things to people is odd. So I suggested some alternate phrasing, which I'm flexible on. I just think that gets at the idea more correctly. And I think it's better without everyone in Reston. I think these things are available to people in Reston, but it's not as if everyone in Reston uses them. Certainly not everyone in Reston uses Herndon facilities. Thanks.
Thank you, Burton. Let's go to David and then John.
Thank you, sir. With regard to what Tammy is concerned about, I would suspect, I'm speaking a little out of turn here, I haven't asked him for it, but I would suspect that Larry Butler would be the one to have some sense, maybe even more than just a sense of how much people from outside Reston come in and use Reston facilities. Certainly the community center, when it's up and running and having plays and things like that. But Larry, if you don't mind, could you add to that conversation?
Sure. So the only facilities that we have that quite frankly are not available to non-residents are the lakes. So if you're a non-resident and you want to, in fact, we have a lot of tennis players from Herndon that play in our leagues, Reston team tennis and so forth in the summer. And then, as I said earlier, end of October, boom, they're gone because they're going back to Herndon or Great Falls or whatever. We don't have a way of, we don't microchip people, and I don't think people would want that, to know how many people are using our pathways, for instance. Pools and tennis, we have a very good handle on the non-resident usage, also with camps and our other events. So, we do serve more than just Reston, and that's by design. It's been that way forever. Our priority obviously is the members because they're paying the yeoman share for the maintenance of the facilities.
All right. Thank you, Larry. David, did you want to have another comment?
No, that was, thank you, Larry. That was more or less what I thought you'd say. And I think that's part of what makes Reston Reston.
All right. Thank you. We have John Mooney, then Jennifer, then Lynn, then Mara. And let's go through those four. So John, you're on.
Thank you, Walter. I want to comment on three parts of this very important first paragraph here. The first thing is whether to include or not the town of Herndon. I tend to want to do it out of neighborliness and a certain spirit of reciprocity, though I completely understand Tammy's point, and I hope to address it in my subsequent comments. The second comment is on the sentence, Reston, kind of in the middle, Reston Association, a member-funded organization, is the primary provider of local serving parks and recreational amenities. And then if we judge right, there could also be the included language from John Farrell, which kind of expands on that. But we're clearly making a statement in this new version that Reston Association is the primary provider. My final comment is on the last sentence. It says, as redevelopment occurs, these increased needs will be addressed collaboratively through proffer contributions toward increasing capacity and upgrading current and existing facilities and or provision of publicly accessible parklands and facilities. And then let me sneak this in. The very next sentence begins with the three primary providers of those amenities are Reston, Fairfax County Parks Authority, and the Reston Community Center. And what I would like to do is I would propose for the task force's consideration that we say at the end of that final sentence in the big first paragraph, these proffers should be equitably shared among the three primary providers of park recreation and cultural services. That's the end of my comment.
If I could just comment on that real quick, Walter, but I do agree with that, John. And further down in this text, there's a new sentence relating to that. It probably makes sense to have a similar sentence here at the beginning.
So Tammy, I hope in those ways your concerns are more than covered, I hope.
Yeah, there is a process where there have been other places in the county where proffered contributions have gone to an association. It's extremely rare. And mainly the concern is frankly for the fiduciary responsibility of a public entity like Fairfax County and giving money to a private organization. It's tricky. And so there are bells and whistles that come with that. So if the task force wants to put language in there, that's fine. But there are other hoops beyond this comp plan that'll have to be jumped through as well.
Walter, could I jump in here? I'm sorry, I'm out of line here, but is
Please.
it possible instead of that those proffered contributions being shared evenly, is there some way in legally trying to avoid that those three entities have some consultative function when proffers are being developed for additional development?
Yeah, and I would be curious. I mean, there is some language already in the plan here about proffered contributions. But Jose, I think we've heard a couple of different ideas and thoughts, and I think the next step, maybe after we get through the comments and frankly after this meeting, is for Jose to send around a new version of this document, and then the task force can chew on this a little bit more. So thank you, David. John Mooney, do you have any other comments, suggestions?
I think he said no.
Okay, all right. All right, Jennifer, you're next, then Lynn, Myra, and Jan.
I will just support John Mooney and Larry's comments. I think that at one point we need to get to the bottom of whether RA is providing public facilities or access to facilities that are going to count towards the facilities that we need in Reston, or they're not. So we need to get to the bottom of that, because I think that really makes a difference to how we write this parks and open space piece, because there's only private funding for those amenities, but yet many of them have several public people using them. So we need to get to that piece. Where I think that we also need to get to is we don't have a listing of the parks and open spaces that are in Reston. So, when we get to figure 14 later, I think it's figure 14, I don't know how we're deciding as a community on what type of facilities we need when we don't really have an inventory of the ones that we have. We have a couple maps with some green shading on them for some types of facilities, but we don't really have a count of the facilities. So for instance, if we look at rectangular fields and we look at the number that we should have in Reston, and you then try to find rectangular fields, which we had really hard, time coming up with, it's how many of those types of fields do we need, and how many do we currently have? And you could go through the list of all of our parks and open spaces to try to determine that. So that's a main concern I also have for this document.
Yeah, in terms of an inventory, is there anyone on staff that St. Clair, anyone else? I believe we heard a presentation from the Park Authority, but I don't know if that just included their inventory. I guess it did. And I believe John Carter, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I don't think we do have an inventory. I mean, the best inventory is the one in that previous paragraph, and it's just a listing of the acreage primarily. I think we should concentrate on the public parks. Get that first. And I think, Jennifer, is that in that illustrative number 14?
Number 15
I think
is
it's
just
15.
the parks. Yeah,
Yeah.
15 is the parks itself. but I think that
we should.
that's the issue. And I have asked John Farrell, who was gracious to kind of help me. I started my own template of all the different types of recreation fields and facilities we have, and started just filling it out this weekend ourselves because we couldn't find it anywhere.
That's going to be hard. And I don't know how much planning we're going to do for RA out of the comp plan. Really, are we actually going to, I mean, maybe we are, but I suspect it's more planning for the future population rather than for RA by itself. Another area that it might, this is a minor thing, you were talking about where the funds come from. The county is maturing, and maybe we ought to have private donations in there as well. At some point, we're hoping these major employers will help us fund some of these facilities. I think it wouldn't be bad to mention that notion. And I had something else. Again, I would concentrate on the public ones now, particularly the ones that Fairfax County is going to be providing, rather than trying to get into RA. Plus, I know we said RA is the primary, but we have the TSA area, which is almost the same population so far. And so there are other organizations, Town Center North, perhaps Town Center might be providing. So just leave it open for those other people to help fund it. It's not all on RA's back, I guess is what I'm saying.
I
Answer your
think that
question.
it,
I don't know
I
where to
think,
start.
yeah, I think that it is on RA's back. I think that's the reason
Maybe.
why this conversation keeps coming up, is because RA has a significant amount of land and facilities that it provides to Reston, whereas the other private entities do not. So I don't disagree with you that maybe we go after private funding for some things. But I think that's the dichotomy of where
Yes.
there's issues with this document.
I think that is a good point, but the proof is in just to do it is identifying these areas and assigning a responsibility, whether it's RA or the Northern Virginia Regional Authority. Well, another thing that I might mention, since I have the floor here a little bit, is the trails. We have a trail section in the transportation section, so somebody needs to win. It should be either in the Parks and Open Space or in the transportation, but probably not in both. So anyway, that's enough of me.
All right. Well, we've got Jennifer. Do you have anything else? Okay. We've got several hands up. We do need to get through. Boy, we got a lot of hands up. All right. I'm going to go through everybody that we have our hands up, and then we do need to move on. We got a presentation that we still need to get to tonight.
Okay.
So we've got, let's see, Lynn, then Myra, then Jan, then Dennis, maybe Gary, not sure. Larry, again, Mark Looney, and then Mark Malcolm. So Lynn.
I'm on the list.
Thank you, Walter. I just wanted to, I guess, voice my support for what John Carter and Jennifer and Tammy were recommending. And, I really do think that, I think that, if we're looking at the revenues that we're getting, what the county is getting from small tax district number 5, I don't see where RA is getting any of that funding to help. It's more of us as members of RA, as citizens and members of the HOA, providing dues that pay for these amenities. So if we can focus on the public space, and I look at the levels that Fairfax County Park Authority is mandating for the anticipated population. And are we including those RA amenities in those figures that Fairfax County is supposed to be providing in terms of ball fields and baseball, soccer? They even talk about the number of golf holes that we should be allotted for a given population, and it's 1 hole per 3,600 people. But those golf courses are public and private. But, you know, we need to figure out what is contributing to these amenities. Yeah, how are we looking at just public? Are we looking at public and private?
Yeah, good question, Lynn. I don't think anybody's talking about proffered money going to the golf courses. So, good point. More to talk about here, clearly. Myra, and then Jan, and then it looks like Dennis may have put his hand down, but Myra, go right ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I'm hoping I'm not saying what everyone else has said, but a couple of things. I'm kind of jumping on what Lynn and Jennifer have said. I do like the idea of listing what RA offers, because I know that concerns have been raised with regard to if we're going to have 12 athletic fields, we're hoping that you're not counting the current existing fields that Reston has, or that, you know, is pooled between all the others. We're hoping about 12 new fields. So I do like the additional language that says, okay, we already have this many fields. And when we say 12, we mean 12 new fields, you know, in addition to what's already existing. So it does help address that double count that people are worried about. John, I appreciate your suggestion about the equitable language. I actually have concerns about the word equitable, because if RA is providing the majority of recreation, maybe it shouldn't be equitable. So I'd certainly put some language there, but I'd like to consider if the word equitable should be even used. Supervisor, I'd like to know, I mean, there is what I thought was like zoning language that says that proffer money can go to an HOA. So I'd like maybe for Jose to provide us with documentation as to what those hoops are that RA has to go through in order for that money to be provided. I'd be curious to know what the problem is there, or what the
So
hoops are.
Myra, let me just jump in. One of the problems is not just, you know, accounting wise, but basically imagine what happens when a proffered commitment goes to a private organization and something bad happens. You know, like maybe the money is not used the way that it's supposed to be used.
Oh,
you know,
yeah, I know.
These are, you know, so they're really two issues. But Myra, why don't we have somebody come in from DPD that can talk to that in other parts of the county where we have seen where there have been arrangements made.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know a little bit more about that. But yeah, like if there's just some documentation or what it is, I'd be curious. Just doesn't have to be now.
Okay.
But language exists, so obviously it has occurred. So, and then the last thing, Jose, I actually caught something that I didn't catch before, and I'm hoping I don't want to have to hop back on here later, but just on page 142, there is a little paragraph, the second paragraph at the bottom of the page, and it talks about enhancements to and redesign of, and it talks about Reston Association fields. And I had caught it earlier in the boxes, the charts, but as I said before, I don't think it's the comps plan's place to tell Reston Association how to enhance or redesign their fields. I think it's a private organization, and we don't do that to other private entities. So anyway, it's just my 2 cents on that one. I didn't catch that earlier. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Myra. Good points there. Jan, and then I believe Gary, if not Dennis. So yeah, all right, Jan, go right ahead and I'll figure out who's next.
Okay, very good. I just want to mention in relation to RCC, Lila Gordon has all the records of who residents and non-residents who have visited the center, and certainly has them for 2019 when it was fully used. She even has them right now, and how it's doing as it opens up more. So she would be a great resource. The other thing is I haven't heard any mention of the Reston Town Center Association and their role in all of this, because they certainly have some parkland of their own and some green space. And I think maybe we're not, Reston Association is not covering all of Reston, and Reston Town Center is a part of it as well.
I would agree with that, and it should be added here at the first of the next paragraph, the three primary providers should be four. And you'll see that a number of other places, well, some places it's already caught, it's up here higher, but it just got left out a few other places.
Good point, Jan. Thank you. And actually, Gary, you're next on the list. So why don't you just keep going?
Well, that was almost my main point right there, is to add RTCA, the paragraphs where it's left off, and change the numbers from 3 to 4, whatever, because it's in some places and it's not in others, and it should be down here, especially when you consider the cultural amenities. They're a major player. The other little thing I would say is back what John Carter talked about in the trails here. That's being covered in transportation. And while obviously it's an amenity which we use here, to me should be covered in transportation, where we're talking about walking and pedestrians and so forth. And so, like John said, it has to be in one or the other. And then I have a bunch of other comments later, but it sounds like you're going to give us all a chance to comment on this anyway.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, there'll be, I think what we'll do is circulate a new version of this and then let everybody get in additional comments. But as folks who have their hand up, if they want to make a point or a comment, Larry, I believe you are next.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to chime in real quick on some of the prior comments regarding the proper contributions and so forth. So, part of the language in this big first paragraph recognizes that we're the, kind of locally serving provider. So, to my knowledge, there's not one development going in any TSA that's going to have a 25-meter outdoor pool. They're not. I don't know if there's one yet that is going to have a tennis court. So we do provide those services, and so I think what we're trying to do here is an acknowledgement of that. And to the extent that the public/private realm, with respect to contributions and so forth, I think we do need to discuss that. We have gotten proffers in the past. They have not been extensive for, I'll just say that. But there are a lot of things that we do that are fully in the public realm that are not controlled access. Our pathways, our tot lots, our play fields and the ball fields. And so, yes, we're 501, C4 organization, but we have a lot of things that are truly in the public realm. And I think it's the acknowledgement of that. And how do we really address that? Because as Lynn or somebody commented, RCC has the benefit of getting resources from every square foot of commercial. We're purely residential. RCC is now 50% roughly funded from the commercial side, and we're purely residential, trying to hold up the Parks and Recreation fort, so to speak. So it's really that acknowledgement, and how can we best navigate that?
Yeah, great points, Larry. Appreciate that. And yeah, I think there's a lot to chew on here, so that's very helpful. I've got Mark Clooney next, and then Mark Malcolm. Mark Looney.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I'm doing this off my phone because I'm not at my desk at the moment. So sorry for being a little slow there. I just wanted to, I'll say, respectfully agree with you, Walter, and respectfully disagree with Larry about sort of the construct of how all of these things are done. And it's not to say that what RA does isn't deserving of respect and acknowledgement along the way. I think the reality is, particularly from the applicant's perspective, is it's the difference between a governmental organization and a homeowners association. And my concern as an applicant's representative is if we start getting into scenarios where we're being expected to spread dollars around to multiple organizations, it's not going to be taking the same dollar that would otherwise be provided and splitting it 3 ways. It's going to be an expectation that $3 be contributed where $1 used to be satisfactory. And it also sets up a scenario where there are competing interests and potentially competing objectives and outcomes between and among those different groups. As Larry said, it's one thing to provide a smaller contribution. There's one former supervisor who famously asked every applicant in the Providence district to make a contribution to the Vienna Little League with pretty much every zoning application that came through. Those sorts of things are, I don't want to say routine, but they're done pretty frequently. By contrast, it's very rare across the county, and I'm not certain that I've seen it, where hundreds of thousands of dollars are contributed via proffers to a private organization in a way that either competes with or provides services that are parallel to what the county provides. And I just think that it's a very slippery slope to start going down that direction, and would caution against it.
All right, thank you, Mark. We have Mark Malcolm with his hand up, and then it is 8:26. We do need to move on to our presentation, but again, this will be recirculated with comments, maybe options, and for the task force to provide additional feedback. Mark Malcolm, did you?
Thank you. I do have a comment, and it follows on with to what Mark Looney said, but I'm going to use something that I recall from John Money. I'm sure to get a perk up on that. There is a thing to do with the TSA owners. There are only a few of them. When you look at Comstock, JBG Smith moving out, they generally own multiple parcels. However, they also can work in, as you, from Mark Looney's point of applicant looking at government, Fairfax County needs to encourage these TSA owners to partner across their multiple developments. So in order to provide larger recreational facilities within their existing properties, work together. There was a smaller example that had occurred with the Wheelie TSA, but there's a bigger opportunity, particularly with the Herndon TSA, not as much with the Reston Town Center one. But that needs to be looked at, not looking at the individual applications, but encouraging them to work together to look at, when one application, making it clear that another follow-on application would, together they will addressing this park need, particularly within the TSA areas. That's my comment. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. And actually, before we move off this topic, I need to apologize to Bill Penniman because I totally missed his. Bill, your first name starts with a W, and it was at the bottom of the screen, and I totally missed it. So, Bill, I think it looks like you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead and make your comment, Bill.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. No, I'll just quick. I put something in the chat, but basically, I think we need a clear requirement that there be civic plazas near each of the subway stations. That is something Bob Simon felt very strongly about, and it should be in the comp plan. There should be one on each side of the toll road. There should be a clear requirement for a physical pathway for people in Reston to get into Lake Fairfax Park, which is right next to us, but we've never really been able to access without driving miles around. It's an easy connection. We need it. The issue of athletic fields, I mean, realistically, 12 athletic fields are going to be pretty darn hard to fit into Reston anywhere. And 3 in the TSAs is also going to be hard. I'm not within 5 or 10 minutes of a rectangular field, and I don't think many people in Reston are. So let's try to be realistic, get the best we can, but not get too hung up on that, is my view. And I certainly agree with Mark's comment that the builders should be required to work together. One other thing is we need to clearly redefine publicly accessible open space. so that it doesn't count the bushes that are packed up next to a building and other things that happen to be out there, and they're nice to look at, but they're not usable open space. And we should make that clarification. Thank you.
All right, Bill, thank you very much. And now I'm going to make one more final exception. I'm going to give John Farrell the last word. John is an attendee. He's also had his hand up. He's been at the bottom of my screen. I just hadn't seen it. Jose or Lisa, if you could unmute Mr. Farrell, and John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Walter. The language that I proposed for inclusion is keyed off of the section in the zoning ordinance, the P district section, in which the amount of recreational contribution is made is specifically set forth. There's a dollar number, and the applicant can either provide that facility on site or give it to the park authority or give it to a homeowners association. And so that's there. We don't have to mess around a whole lot with the dollar number. And it's specifically authorized going to the homeowners association. But what I really keyed off of, Walter, was figure 15 on, what is it, page 42 of the current plan. It lists several public parks, but when you go down the list, the total number of local serving public parks is 26 acres owned by the park authority. And if we're going to list the park authority properties, which we do in Article 15, and it's only 26 acres, then there needs to be a balance struck to show that, in fact, the vast majority of recreational open space resources are not provided by the park authority. They're provided overwhelmingly, 1,350 acres provided by RA, and with very few limitations on someone's ability to be there. But I also had one last question, and then I'll be quiet. On that list on figure 15 is a property listed as Reston Town Green. And it took me a while to figure out where this was. And it's 5 acres of basically vacant scrub land that fronts on Fountain Drive. And it's not developed with anything. There's not a swing, there's not a tot lot, there's nothing. And it's not owned by the park authority. It's actually owned by the Board of Supervisors for the benefit of Small Tax District number 5. So I don't think it belongs on figure 15. My understanding is that 5 acres was intended to be traded with the developer of Reston Town North. That's what it, so effectively it's not park authority property, it's, I don't know what, investment property or trade land or something like that. And when you look at all that, you're down to a very small footprint in local serving parks from the park authority. And this really goes to the planning commissioner, John's comment. There's very little park authority property upon which to serve the needs of the 60 or 70,000 people who already live here, or the future people who are going to come here. I mean, I don't know, can we have 10-story parks? I don't know. But it just seems to me that whatever recreational facilities or opportunities are going to be provided to the future residents of Reston are going to be in large measure the Reston Association 1,350 acres. And it needs to be set out that that's basically where you're going to get your recreational opportunities from. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. And Larry, go right ahead. If you want to add anything.
Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, so John, you made a good point. The Reston Town Green, that was the 5 acres that the Park Authority donated to the Board of Supervisors for a 90,000 square foot commitment to indoor rec center at Reston Town Center North. One could suggest that the civic green or civic plaza that ultimately will come to Reston Town Center North, I know that Walter's got a very strong interest in that, it could take the place in that chart, but you're right, Reston Town Green is no longer exists and should be removed, at least in that form.
Yeah, in Supervisor Alcorn, I had a lot of comments on 15, and Larry and I didn't get a chance to talk today, but we were going to talk about 15 and following along with John Farrell's comments. They're really on the money here, so sorry to barge in there.
No, that's okay. No, this is good. This has been a very interesting and thorough discussion. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. But Jose will be putting together comments and circulating a new version of this for feedback, and I believe we'll also be consulting with Larry probably before he goes back and sends that around. So. Thank you, everybody, for putting that together. So, Jose, if you believe we're ready to move on to the next item, and if you could go ahead and put the agenda back up, if you get a chance. And let's just remind everybody, we've got a little less than an hour to go. We are running a little late. We're going to 9:30 tonight. So we do have, let's just spend just a few minutes on affordable housing. We need to get some feedback from task force members on affordable housing, and then we'll go into our presentation on energy and the environment. So Jose, do you want to kick us off, or is this John Carter?
I can kick it off. That's totally
Great.
fine.
Let's spend about 10 minutes or so on this. Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so staff is available from the last task force meeting. They're on the call if there are any additional questions. They are working through the request for more information that the task force did provide, and I think where this discussion is and maybe Commissioner Carter can speak to it, but what is existing in the plan and what the Board of Supervisors recently adopted as the WDU policy. Yeah, let me put that up on the screen. So I believe Commissioner Carter can talk to it, but the way that the current plan has a sliding scale, as you go up, you get more a percentage of WDU units. I think the one thing is it doesn't list the tiers, the AMIs. So yeah, you go from you start at 12% and you can go up to 18. And again, the Board of Supervisors recently, let's find the slide, recently adopted a new WDU policy countywide and also for Tyson's. So I guess some of the comments I was looking to get from the task force were thoughts on what's existing. Well, actually, there's three options, and Commissioner Carter, feel free to unmute if needed. There are three options. Do we stick with what's currently in the plan? Do we go with one of the two options that that were recently adopted by the Board of Supervisors, or how do we address this issue of affordable housing? That's the best way I can open it up. So
if I could break in a little bit,
yeah,
when
go
I
ahead.
first started on the commission, the first thing I saw was this affordable housing, and it's that those numbers on the left side, 80, 100, and 120%, which I thought was terrible for Reston. And what was happening is at 120%, that's higher than the market. And so that just really wasn't working. So what I've been doing on my own, basically with the supervisors, is lowering the tiers to 70, 80, and 90. Most of them. There is some variation. And so, but keeping the 12%, that little chart that you saw where you go up in density, if it was me, I would keep that chart and then adjust the tiers in any way you want. What has happened? So you see the chart. So, and this would apply to every place in Reston, not just the TSA. This is every place. Now go back to the chart, Jose. Yes. Now you see what they are giving is a 12% bonus for 8%, providing 8% WDUs as the floor, but you can go up. So you can see you can go up to the 20%. So it's kind of a range that they've provided. So this all applies to most of all of Fairfax County, except Tyson's has their own, and Tyson's is a different animal. I'm not sure. We could follow them, I guess, but we probably ought to come up with our own. I think it's the tiers to resolve here. and then what percentage of the tiers. I do think for Reston to give a 12% bonus where only 2% of those are at 60% is really not very good. I understand it's a floor, and so the WDUs, it's kind of a negotiable thing. So we just ought to do our own thing here in Reston, but I think staff could provide us some feedback. I have great respect for the housing staff here in Fairfax, and they'll help us come up with something. But what we have now, this has just been passed in the last few months, is what you see in the upper right area. And it has a floor, which is the 8% with 12% bonus, but you can go up to 20%. So these all get negotiated. And again, I would urge us to just keep the percentages the way we have them, that chart, but then address the tiers in some way that works well with the rest of Fairfax. This should be fairly easy to tease out.
Could I just ask where affordable housing fits?
Well, this is affordable housing. There's a separate requirement for that. It's called ADUs.
Right.
That only applies to single-family detached and townhouses and what they call buildings that are type 5, which is the low-rise buildings. That's where the ADU, and that's in the zoning ordinance. The WDU requirement is in the policy plan. And you can see the tiers. I believe for the ADUs, it's 65%. Walter, maybe you can help me out there. It's 60 or 65% across the board for the ADUs.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, John's right. I mean, effectively, these end up being affordable housing when they're at a low enough tier, but they're called workforce housing as opposed to affordable dwelling.
So the affordable
the two are blurring together, really, is what's happening here. So I would call the 60% as the traditional affordable, and the 70 and 80%, I would call those workforce housing.
Okay.
Really, is what it is. But
so the Aperture is the only building that I know within the TSA that offers affordable, and that's thanks to Chuck Beach, who is I just admire the heck out of him. But isn't Aperture the only place that has affordable dwelling units?
No, every project has their share of affordable or workforce housing. And there's some glorious examples, but you have to kind of get into the example. But
I know they have
others. It's very interesting.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you.
The signature to not here, for example, have affordable housing. This is examples.
Yeah. Now, the rest of the story for the affordable housing is how do we keep the existing affordable housing? And we might want to have a little bit of information in the comp plan about that. There are some of these affordable housing projects that are struggling a bit because they're older. And so how to keep those going should probably be the rest of this section. But I wouldn't imagine this to be a long-winded presentation. We've got to settle this tier issue, and then we've got to settle the I don't want to use the word redevelopment, but the enhanced developments of the existing affordable housing so we can keep them. So that's probably enough for affordable housing. Is that probably has everybody confused? And
no, thank you, John. No, this is helpful, and it is complicated. There are multiple programs, there are multiple needs, and this is an excellent slide that shows what we're doing countywide and also in Tyson's. And of course, in Reston, we've had our own guidance, but as John mentioned, this has been an area for negotiation at the rezoning phase. And this, I believe, one of the things that we might want to think about, whatever baseline level is set, this could also be one of those items where developers would need to earn towards the maximum of the comprehensive plan density range.
Good point.
So
we shouldn't be shy on this, and I hesitate to say this, but we are on the low rung in the region in terms of providing affordable housing. The staff does a great job in building affordable housing, but this inclusionary, where it's part of the zoning classes, we're on the lowest rung, I think, in terms, if you compare it to other jurisdictions. So we needn't be too shy about this and having some pretty good aspirations. Plus, Reston is famous for this, and we should remain famous for this.
Okay, there do seem to be some hands up, but I'm not sure if they're old hands, frankly, or new hands. If anyone wants to make a comment, quick comment, go ahead and do so.
Mark
Hello,
Malcolm.
Walter. This is Burton.
Okay, Mark and then Burton.
Okay. It's to an earlier comment that John Carter made of applying this, the potential of the policy across all of Reston. Agree in principle, but there is one element. There are the TSAs. Why shouldn't they have a slightly higher WDU policy figure applied to them? That's where people need to work, and that's where the transportation is.
Yes, well, that's where the sliding scale works. So at the lowest densities, and pick whatever you want, right now it's 1 FAR. There's almost nothing that's 1 FAR in the surrounding neighborhoods. So those would have the 12%. In the TSA, if you go up to 3 and 4 FAR, which a lot of them have, the sliding scale works. So that's how that's supposed to work. I don't know what
The
that
issue
answers your
is
question.
whether that's aggressive enough in the TSAs using the sliding scale. That's
Well,
the question.
Yeah, it could be.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And then Burton.
On the what the level should be at, I don't know. I trust that John Carter and the housing staff knows better than I do for sure. But my question is about, I emailed, basically these affordable housing policies are to deal with the problem of housing unaffordability that's partially caused by zoning and property tax systems that tend to drive prices up. And I suppose it's outside of the scope of this task force work to talk about reforming zoning and property tax systems. But I just wanted to point out that such reforms could lower housing prices overall. So market rate housing would become more affordable.
That's a pretty interesting argument. The argument goes, if you supply a lot, the costs will go down. I actually am a real advocate of this inclusionary zoning that we have in Fairfax County, although I wish it was a little more demanding. But building housing, I mean, it's okay to build projects for affordable housing, but I really like it integrated within each project, so that you don't have the stigma of, oh, well, you live in that building over there that has the stucco on the outside, and we live in the building over here that has the nice brick, or name your favorite material. So I think it's a good notion. It's very ingrained in the region. So I'm not trying to convince you one way or another, but increasing the demand increasing the supply is hard in Reston in a way that would bring the house prices down. You might have to go up an awful high, but including it in each project, I think this has proven to be a really workable way. And if you look at some of these projects, even the little ones that have been done, it is really convincing. I think. Look at Toll Brothers is a good example.
Sure. The little that I know about these programs, they make sense to me. It just seems that the need for these programs is because we have policies on zoning and property taxes that in general contribute to higher housing prices. So if we could
It's true.
Do some reforms on those systems, then we would not have such a problem, and there would not be such a need for these programs that are seeking special, allocated housing that's designated to be affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Burton, we're looking at the land use side here. Stay tuned for the tax reform side. Different process. Thank you for flagging that. Okay, Mark Looney has his hand up and we do need to move on, but Mark, go ahead.
Sorry, I think I left mine up, but if you gave me the floor, I'll take it anyway. Um, the only point I'll make is that to John's point, there's been a lot of conversation recently about making these numbers kind of line up in an appropriate and legal format, because despite the fact that there is an expectation and a desire to provide these affordable housing programs, there still comes with it a constitutional responsibility to ensure that it's not a taking of private property in the context of this. And so it's a sort of carefully balanced weight. And the only thing I'll say is, in the context of the recent adoption of the new policy guidelines, there is still a distinction between Tyson's and the rest of the county because of the rents and other differences that exist in Tyson's that don't exist in other places in the county. And I don't think that while Reston's rents are probably higher than the Richmond Highway corridor, they don't yet approach Tyson's. And so as we think about sort of where to draw the line and where to plug the numbers in here, I wouldn't gravitate just to Tyson's and say we're just like Tyson's, because it's a different economic animal altogether. And so give some thought to, rather than just picking a off the menu board of this looks good and that looks good, there needs to be some conversation about the constitutionality of how this is applied and what it does on a in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We do need to move on. Any last comments? Because we've got to get to our presentation tonight, and I think we're going to have to punt on the last item on the agenda to another meeting. But all right, let's then move on. Thank you for the feedback. I think expect to see through the listserv, if not by the next meeting, then shortly thereafter, a proposal on affordable housing, and we'll schedule that for a future task force meeting. So I believe, all right, good. Looks like Joe's slides are coming up. It's 8:52. We've got until 9:30, and we're going to be hearing from Joe Gorney. Joe, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Supervisor Alcorn, and good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Gorney of the Department of Planning and Development, Environment and Development Review Branch. And tonight I'd like to offer you a broad overview of the existing environmental policies for the Reston area. Next slide. And to start with, the vision for the Reston area is to create a place to live, work, and play. So the policy guidance then explains a little bit of what that means. So some themes quickly emerged throughout the Reston plan. The first of these is creating a sense of community. The second of these is the preservation of natural areas and the integration of these various open spaces that you've been talking about into the built environment. And then the third point would be the integration of transit station areas into the larger community. Next slide. And as for design considerations, all development is expected to blend into the existing community fabric with a focus on bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. And Reston was also designed with a very distinct form, which is largely an outgrowth of its very intentional design policies and principles. Next slide. So these principles and some associated strategies were included in the plan and intended to help Reston achieve its vision. So ecological resources are to act very importantly as an organizing feature, and nature is expected to be integrated into the built environment, as I previously mentioned. Next slide. And strategies are also included in the plan that help us achieve a healthy tree canopy. And these recognize that you can't simply preserve and then forget about a resource. Doing so could ultimately lead to decline and a gradual loss of resources. Management and awareness of succession for treat areas is critical, along with the incorporation of various planting areas, and that could include overstory trees, understory trees, shrubs, and perennials. Next slide. And water resources are also mentioned as another critical defining element of the Reston community. So trails often take you to, along, and over these resources. Next slide. And for TSAs with their higher densities, higher levels of green building for non-residential uses are expected. However, most of the comprehensive plan guidance for green building can be found in the county's policy plan, which applies countywide. Next slide. And Reston noise policies recognize the presence of the Dulles Tollway and the Metro Rail station and line. It includes some accommodation of increased noise levels for the siting of residential uses near to these noise generators. However, as with the green building policies, plan guidance for noise impacts can be found in the policy plan, and all policies regarding noise mitigation for open spaces and interior spaces are expected to be met based on those policies. Next slide. And also included in the Reston plan are descriptions of single-family and multifamily residential neighborhoods. There's an expectation that natural areas and mature tree canopy will be maintained in these neighborhoods. This can become quite challenging, as some of you may know, for redevelopment projects or when there is a need for rehabilitation of these neighborhoods. Next slide. And I'd also note that the glossary of the policy plan contains a definition for natural landscaping, which is related to many of the policies of the Reston plan. This definition includes insight into the components that were deemed important by both community and staff members as part of that plan amendment, which was fairly recent. Natural landscaping includes the use of native plants, the control of invasives, healthy soils, and the retention of rainwater on site. It recognizes that each site has a role to play in the creation of a healthy community. Next slide. And I touched on some of the topics already within the policy plan, and listed here are several more. These include light pollution, conservation easements, and environmental monitoring. Next slide. And Reston has also become a member of the Biophilic Cities Network in 2018. So this designation recognizes Reston's commitment to protecting and enhancing the natural resources that are so important to the community. Next slide.
Joe, are we really going to protect that horrible looking spider? Sorry, I did.
Yes, you should. It's very important to have the top level predators in any sort of ecosystem, and that orb weaver is definitely something in there that I very much like. So that was next to my garden, and I very much appreciate it. So, and as I was mentioning, the Biophilic Cities Network is out there, and with joining it, it recognizes the value and contribution of nature in cities across the world to the lives of urban residents. So for all of these member cities, they place importance on daily contact with nature as an element of a meaningful urban life. So the network also recognizes that we have an ethical responsibility to conserve nature as shared habitat for non-human life and for people, including spiders. Next slide, please. And the RASER, the Reston Association's State of the Environment report, has been an important resource for several years now. So listed here are the various chapters of the report, which offer some insight into community priorities. These offer information not only about the existing state of the resources and several issues in Reston, but also trends. And next slide. And finally, I would like to leave you with some thoughts from a landscape architect, Daryl Morrison. He says that the desired landscape qualities and themes can be applied to both individual sites and larger landscapes, in this case, like Reston. So he would mention that a place is expected to be experientially rich, which means there's always something to see, hear, and touch, ecologically sound, in which ecological functionality is incorporated into the design of the place, which celebrates what is unique to your community, whether that's ecological resources, heritage resources, or any element of the community, including its economy. And lastly, dynamic. The landscape changes through time, both through the seasons and the years. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for
Joe,
your attention.
thank you very much, Joe. That was wonderful. It covered a lot of territory very quickly. Thank you very much for doing that. I do want to give a shout out to John Carter. Frankly, the language in my board matter that I did early last year was suggested by Commissioner Carter. So, John, thank you very much for making sure that this is included in here. And I also want to give a shout out. You know, Tammy, you've been pushing a number of these issues a long time. So I actually want to give either John, do you want to make any comments right off, and then I see if Tammy has any thoughts.
Maybe a couple thoughts. We have a lot of redevelopment areas in Reston. One of the things that's been bothering me as we go through these various approvals is we have a lot of existing buildings. A typical project would be a large site that has 2 or 3 existing buildings, and then it has some new buildings, and it's crafted in a whole scheme. But basically, the existing buildings get to go for free. They don't have to be part of the green building standards that we have for the county. I think some way of making these come up to be what I call green neighborhoods, which is actually in the comp plan, the aspiration of making it in the totality. So when we put these projects together, and like I said, an awful lot of it's going to be redevelopment or infill with existing, and making the whole project as green as we possibly can. I know the Board of Supervisors has targeted this whole climate change and this as area, and I'm not even quite sure how to craft this. There isn't too much in the comp plan, so I think we could probably do a pretty good job, and we could probably do something fairly creative, but there's a balance of this, of how much new do you do, and does it fit the policy plan that is an issue. But this is a great topic, and something that we could do a little bit more here in Reston.
Okay, thank you, John. Tammy, did you have any comments?
Yes, please. I regularly go berserk at Reston planning and zoning meetings because we get, and listen up, Mark Looney, this is for you. We get, and not only Mark, but Mark does bring a lot of projects before us. And we get high dollar developments coming in, and they are willing to satisfy the modest and energy saving policies that are required. But God forbid that we talk to them about green roofs or whatever. Now, I will say that green roofs are getting more traction because Reston Planning and Zoning will hammer that at every single person that walks through that door ad nauseum. But my point is, we're in a desperate crisis with our environment. And we really need at some point, and I think this Reston plan, we're biophilic for God's sake, we need to set the standard higher, as high as we can, to promote energy saving and sound environmental policy. And it's just not being done. I would love to bring the Reston Association Razor people who are experts in the natural environment and other things into this discussion. And I know also that Bill Penniman has a very distinct environmental, he's very active with the Sierra Club. So I think that we have resources on this task force that we can bring in to really draw a very sound new environmental energy chapter. And I would hope that that would be supported. We just can't keep limping along with this minimalistic stuff over and over and over. Nothing's getting done anywhere. We have to set the standard. Thank you.
There's just one more thing, Walter, if I could.
Sure.
There's the USGBC, the Green Building Council is headquarters right here in Washington. They would probably help us out in this. And yeah, Bill Penniman does have a special interest in this, but I would maybe contact them. I don't know too much about the biophilic communities and where that's certified. Maybe they're here in Washington, but it might be good to bring them in. Is limited familiarity I am with this. There's over 100 of these certified green communities in this country. Most of them completed at this point. So this is a topic. We might get some help from outside, and I think they would help us for nothing, really, because Reston is a special place. And
yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, Tammy. And before I call on Bill, actually, he's got his hand up. If I could ask Jose to pull up at least the first part of the current comp plan, the beginning of the environmental section, because I think Joe did a good job sort of summarizing what's in the plan, but I think also let's make sure, because I think part of the process that we want to go through here is not just thinking about new stuff that needs to go in the plan, but where might there be stuff in the existing plan, either that needs more attention or frankly, for whatever reason, has not been implemented and therefore might need to be adjusted.
And by the way, just as a comment, Joe is the man. I would say we should keep with Joe. He's very much into this, and he has a nice personality for this, and plus he's knowledgeable besides. You put those two together and you probably get something.
All right. Bill, go right ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate Joe's recognizing that Reston is a unique community to which environmental values are part of the core. And I know John Carter and I and others, the last time we went through the master plan task force process, tried to put in language to assure that Reston would get distinct recognition in sustainability, creative energy solutions, and the like, in order that we be ahead of the curve going forward. But unfortunately, the builders negotiate with the staff, and the staff has given us close to zero help on doing anything other than whatever the basics are. And so I don't know how we get around that. I think it may be that we simply have to write quite more explicit than you might want in a comp plan. But if the staff is going to ignore it, then we have to be very explicit about levels of energy efficiency, for example, the ideas of green roofs or purple roofs and that sort of thing. Bird-friendly construction, because we have a lot of these high-rise, shiny buildings that are in fact a real problem. There are quite a few things. Oh, EV chargers, the staff position requires 1 or 2% of parking spaces to have the capability of being EV capable in the future, which is absurd given the current state and forecasts for EV. So I think this is something that we need a strong, clear, enforceable set of standards going forward. And as I've indicated in emails, I'd be happy to work with John, Tammy, and others to write such a section. Right now, these issues are spread over several different sections, and so maybe we need to concentrate them. But I do think Reston is unique and wants to be really unique. And honestly, it's good for Fairfax because people who don't build to the future needs are going to be the stranded buildings down the road, and we'd like to stay relevant for the life of the buildings. So my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Let's next go to Reston Bell. Reston, you're up. And then we'll go to Mark, Malcolm, and Jennifer.
evening, everyone.
Ooh.
I, am a person who has long appreciated and enjoyed how close, our living and nature are in Reston. And I, as someone who remembers when the town center was still like forested area and like the farms, and as every like project that has happened over the years, I always wonder like where will the animals go, right? And we start to see them, in new spaces that they usually aren't, or sadly like on the side of the road because they've been hit because they're, and so I just wonder, as part of this process or as part of these considerations, like what requirements do these developing or these developers have to help maintain and provide opportunities or space or like I know there are some creative ways where bird feeding spaces can be kind of created. Like what obligations or requirements are we making of these land developers to find creative ways to make sure that these animals still have access to the food they need or to the water that they would have otherwise been able to have access to. So I, pardon my ignorance in this regard, but I'm just curious, like what really do we do to make sure that those displaced animals have land that they can continue to survive on?
So rest and habitat, basically, for these animals, right? Okay, that's a great question, and I'm gonna jump up and I'm gonna put Mr. Mooney on the spot for that. Mark, are you still on?
Say
And,
Mooney or
oh
Looney?
no, I'm sorry, Mr. Looney. Sorry.
That's okay.
Mark.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on all of these comments, and I'll start with Tammy and Bill Penniman, and then move to Reston's comment. It's not the staff that is telling us what to do as the applicants. It is other county policies that are adopted by the Board of Supervisors and incorporated into different elements of the county regulatory regime. There is a policy plan component of the comprehensive plan that sets out a number of different policies, from land use to environment to historic preservation to, you name it. And those policies are established countywide by the Board of Supervisors, and those are the standards to which the staff then holds applicants who go through the process. The fact that staff, for example, says developers only have to put in 2% EV vehicles is not because they pick 2%, it's because the Board of Supervisors, in adopting the policy at some point in the past, decided that that was a good framework for the policy, and those policies are updated every so often across the board. And I use the EV as an example, but it's not the staff that's just making this stuff up as we go. In fact, they're oftentimes asking developers to go above and beyond whatever the county policy is, particularly in areas where things are moving more rapidly. Green buildings, electric vehicle stations, other sorts of things. They're actually pushing to do more than what's required. On the green building stuff, the countywide policy, I believe, is certification in or no certification in certain areas, depending on which suburban center or urban center you're in. It's anywhere from bronze to silver to gold, and maybe even a platinum somewhere in terms of commercial buildings. And then residential can pick from different certification programs, LEED being one of them, but others that are on the market. And so all of those are policies and standards set as part of the policy plan by the Board of Supervisors every so often, and then applied to individual development projects as they come through the pipeline. There are things that are in the Reston plan that are unique to Reston that don't exist in Annandale or Bailey's Crossroads or other places. And so there are some ways to make some tweaks in a particular area. But as a general matter, those are where the policies are set. With respect to kind of Reston's question of, does anybody ask us to figure out where the beavers and the squirrels are going to live? The answer is no, particularly in an urbanizing environment. candidly, the comprehensive plan, I believe in Tyson's as well as in Reston, doesn't contemplate where the deer and the antelope will roam once the urban areas are built. The one thing that has been dealt with more recently and more frequently are bird-friendly designs to assist birds in dealing with stuff, and that's something that's coming up in countywide places. Tree preservation is oftentimes an issue in, I'll call it, quasi-suburban areas, but generally in the TSAs, that's not been a focus because you can't build 6 levels of below-grade structured parking without grading the site out in a way that essentially gets rid of the existing vegetation in most circumstances. So it's focusing on what you put back as opposed to what you take out in the urban areas. Obviously, it's a different kettle of fish when you're getting out into other parts of Reston, where it's more of a suburban component, but there's less development that's occurring in those areas as well. I hope that answers the question.
Mark, thank you for sharing your perspective and information on that. I think it's very helpful. I see we have 4 folks with their hands up. Let's do Mark, Malcolm, Jennifer, Michelle, and Chris Daniels. So, Mark.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Alcorn. I'm going to disagree with Mark Looney. I consider a couple of comments almost apologist to the county, but respect with county staff. Respectfully, on this critical of environmental policy, I have to look at FCDOT related projects that are adjacent to or in the VDOT rights of way. I've had several responses to me in the past, and I've observed multiple examples of minimal or no consideration of applying the environmental policy with regard to streetscapes. In this regard, I've had put in writing to me that the comp plan with regard to FCDOT projects is only guidance. In other words, not required. That was in one email that I received. There needs to be a review process like Bill Penniman addressed to ensure that there's external review for approval to waive, particularly with staff developed projects that impact the Reston area. I agree with Mark Looney that there are several things in the Reston portion of the county's comprehensive plan that are unique to Reston, particularly with streetscapes. However, I also want to point out that with respect to green communities and some of the elements, Fairfax County, quite frankly, is behind in applying some of the environmental policy with regard to streetscapes, even to nearby communities such as Arlington County and increasingly even Washington, D.C. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And we do actually have a couple of attendees with their hands up. So let's get through task force members and then those attendee hands. And that should bring us right to about 9:30. So Jennifer, you are up next, then Michelle, and Chris Daniels, then Jan.
I just put mine in the comments or in the chat box, so you can skip me.
Okay. Wow. Thank you, Jennifer. All right. Michelle, you're on.
Okay. Hi. Sorry, I should have done the same, but I'll be very quick. I fully support the idea of having our own section on the environment. It's just shocking that it's not already there in a full realized chapter. So if we could do that, I would really support that.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And Jennifer, thank you for your comment too in the chat. Okay, Chris, and then Jan, and then we got a couple of attendees.
All right, thank you, sir. I want to definitively agree with Mr. Carter about reuse. I will point out the greenest building is one that's already built. It's something that I think is frequently ignored is the amount of embodied energy that is thrown away the moment we start demolishing structures. If you just take a 50,000 square foot building, that's 80 million BTUs or 640,000 gallons of gasoline. Just to take that building out and then replace it with another building is it's just saddening because that's usually described as them being green, but most of those buildings then have to sit around for 60+ years to balance out that lost embodied energy. So I would hope that we can start building into this a way to encourage reuse when it's possible. And I'm not just, I know I'm the guy who talks about old buildings and historic buildings. I'm just talking about any building that could be reused, and particularly because this is a way of saving. This is a way of reusing energy in a way that I think should be considered. And I think we should reward developers that pursue those avenues. And so I would like to see the plan kind of lean heavier into that area. I think I just want to comment on Reston's comment. I think she was actually commenting on all of Reston, not just the town center and where the animals go. And I would like to see more initiatives to try to provide corridors or connective tissue between other places, because it is, while we do have a very urbanized environment, we also have a suburban environment that is constantly running into challenges with nature. And we need to, I would rather be living in harmony with it as best as possible. And I would love to see Reston continue to jump on lists of cities that support things like pollinators in particular. I think that's, I mean, I can't not agree with Tammy. We're at a critical point. I see it everywhere in my job across the country. So if Reston's going to keep being a leader in it, we should have policies, particularly here, that support that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate your comments there. Let's go to Jan, and then we're going to go to John Farrell and Jonathan Russell.
I just want to express what I was very concerned when we talked about Reston becoming like Tyson's, because the beauty of Reston is that we have nature here, that we have the paths, that where I live at the end of the street, either way, you can go right into the woods and you see the animals there. And I mean, that's part of the joy of Reston. When we start to think about, well, let's take the village centers and build them up and let's get as many people as possible, I don't see that as exactly what Robert Simon had in mind when he built the village centers. He built them as a place to congregate, but also to have a little bit of the trails and the woods remaining, not to have it all urbanized. So I just am concerned about the vision for Reston becoming as urbanized as Tyson's or some of the other areas like Ballston.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Let's go to John Farrell, attendee number one, and then Jonathan Russell. So John, you don't get quite the last word, but you're pretty close.
No, I thought I'd taken it down.
There you go. Oh, okay. No problem. All right, then. No problem. All right, Jonathan Russell has his hand up as an attendee.
Hi, so this is Jonathan Russell. I'm also here with my spouse, Darius Masudi. And I just want to speak briefly in favor of kind of the density and stuff that's come through a lot of these discussions. And a lot of this is about regarding parks, transportation, and everything else that's come through, even the green spaces and from the environmental review. I just want to say that I feel that the density, even, Tyson's and stuff, has been well managed in regards to that, to preserve that density, and density helps to preserve the basically green spaces that Reston likes. So without that density, we end up with the sprawl and we lose all that environmental protection and green spaces.
All right, John, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for attending tonight. Yes, another comment? Just here.
Hi, this is Darius Masudi. I'm John's spouse.
Oh, yes, Darius. Hello.
Yes, hi. I also wanted to submit a formal comment just in favor of increased density in Reston. I think that increased density will benefit both affordable housing and the preservation of the environment. No one's talking about having increased density by just like bulldozing all our parks and building towers there, but by having density and building high, at least people of my generation would be able to afford to live here more readily. John and I mean, I consider us privileged that we can afford to own a home here, but so many people my age, like they're just living in rooms or basements or things like that, and they should have the ability to own something as well. So that's my comments regarding that.
Well, thank you, Darius. Thanks for getting your comment in there as well.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, it is 9:25, and actually, I do see Gary has his hand up. Gary, do you want to take the last word?
Well, it's a short last word. It's this that I think Mark Looney has some real points there we need to keep in mind, and the connections to the other areas of Fairfax, the policy plan and so forth. We need to think about that as we're going through this so the comprehensive plan is effective as it can be.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we've covered an awful lot of ground tonight across a number of issues. We did not get all the way through the agenda. We will put that last item on a future agenda, and that's where we'll be talking about economic diversity and talking about the long-term for various developments that are being built and planned now. So with that, does anyone have any final thoughts or comments before we adjourn for the evening?
Yes, Walter. Tammy.
Yes, Tammy.
I'm concerned that we're racing through things and we're going to run out of time. We need to think clearly how we're going to attack the environmental section. Can Bill Penniman and I take that? And what about the Parks and Rec? I have 2 pages of comments that I wouldn't dare bring up because we're so short of time, but that needs further work. So what I'm basically saying is a housekeeping thing. We're racing through stuff, but we need to actually build and write these chapters so that they can be approved by the task force, or we're not going to make it. I'm worried about us done. Every week we get more people coming in, or more every month, I should say, and months in advance of more presentations, which are important, but we also have the responsibility of having a product that's ours. So
yeah, thank you, Tammy. Great points. Yeah, if you and Bill want to come back and maybe put something together to mark up the environmental sections, that would be awesome. If you guys could do that, and perhaps if you want to run it by John Carter in the meantime as well, or bounce any ideas off him, I think that would be fantastic. And if there are others that want to work with Tammy and Bill on that, and Bill, you just got volunteered. I don't know if you actually wanted to do that or not, but Tammy just volunteered you. So I'll just assume that's okay.
Volunteer.
I volunteered before, so that's fine.
Okay, and then I heard Lynn there. All right, and perhaps Reston or someone else, if you want to join in that, please do let Tammy or Bill know. And Tammy, on the parks and open space part, let's see what Jose comes back with and see where we are with that. I realized there were a lot of comments and there's a lot of stuff there, but let's give that one more meeting. And I think it's a good segue, Tammy, to the point that we're really getting to the end of presentation time, and we're getting more into discussion time, and what I think has already happened in some chapters, basically writing time. So I think it's probably good for the task force to think about much of the next 2 to 3 months being more drafting and reviewing than anything. But of course, there's going to need to be a lot of discussion that comes along with that as well. Okay, wonderful. Well, listen, it's 9:29. Let's end it on time. Thank you, everybody, for all the active participation this evening and in between. And as always, don't hesitate to contact the office, Jose, Lisa, and thanks everybody for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Walter.
much.
Thanks, Jose.
Yes,
Thanks,
Jose,
Walter.
thank you for everything.